Okay, so let me start off by saying I raid progressed in World of Warcraft on the hardest difficulty for years, and it was something that I loved. Seeing new raid encounters, learning new mechanics, seeing the team come together after so much trial and error, and seeing the boss's HP slowly whittling down to 0%. The elation when the boss finally dies. That is such a great feeling. Now, when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, I had some experience playing it back when A Realm Reborn and Heavensward first came out, but I didn't really commit to the game until Shadowbringers.
Okay.
You know, after Shadowlands had completely demotivated me from playing World of Warcraft anymore.
I can relate.
Unfortunately, when I got into Final Fantasy XIV, Shadowbringers had already been out, so I didn't get to experience the expansion fresh, or how raid progression felt. The groups I did get into, for the Extremes and Savages, they were groups that already knew the encounters. As I'm sure you are aware, going through an encounter with a group that already knows what to do is a very different experience than going into an encounter that has yet to be learned.
Yeah, I know that.
With Endwalker out, I finally got the chance to see what progression is like when all the content is fresh, when everyone is blind and has to learn the fights. What it's like to get the required gear to even get into the harder content.
I'm actually really curious about
With that, let's compare how Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft do raid progression.
Okay. Getting min-eye level.
The first thing you have to do at the start of an expansion in both games is get to the minimum item level to do. Well,
you guys, stop making fun of his voice and shit like that. Yeah, it's childish. It's weird. Like, I'll tell you something, okay? My channel is not a haven for you to be hostile or vitriolic or insult people. If you are insulting people on their appearance or being rude to them, know that you run the risk of being banned. We do not do this here at all. You can make fun of me, but that's it.
You know, the harder content. In World of Warcraft's case, it's to queue up for heroics, to get the gear to queue up for looking for a raid. And you also will need gear for anyone to consider inviting you to a party for raiding and mythic pluses. And in Final Fantasy XIV's case, it's the minimum item level to queue up for the extreme trials, the raids, and also some endgame dungeons.
Okay.
I just wanted to start off by saying this is in relation to the start of an expansion. Things will change as the expansion goes on.
Yeah,
in World of Warcraft, it can take a very long time to get the gear you need to run the content you want. As an
does it anymore? I feel like it kind of does, but it's probably not as bad.
Example, to queue up for the heroic dungeons, I remembered running a friend through the normal dungeons for hours to get his item level high enough for the heroics.
It is a long time. Yeah.
When the expansion first came out, there was no currency you got that you could exchange for gear. So it was really up to the RNG gods for getting your item level up. In Final Fantasy XIV, by the time I hit level cap, I was already within 5 item levels to being able to queue up for the extreme trials. The game flat out gives you 5 pieces of high item level gear from just doing the MSQ, filling out your left side of the equipment screen. And then it's just a matter of getting some gear for the right side. You know,
I feel like gear isn't really as big of a factor in Final Fantasy in general. I feel like you don't really play the game for gear. It's more that, like, the experience. Like, gear is basically just a check mark that you do. Gear is just glam. Yeah, it's skill-based. Pretty much, that's what it seems. Obviously, like, whenever... there's a huge difference. Like, if you do something... I remember we did King Thordan without min-eye level and, like, no echo. There were no mechanics. No mechanics whatsoever. So, like, it does make a difference. Absolutely, but it needs to be a big difference.
Rings and necklaces and stuff of that nature. It's pretty quick to run a few dungeons to fill those out. And if you are supremely unlucky with the RNG, you always get the tombstones that you can then exchange to fill in that gear. I've now leveled up 3 jobs to level cap in Final Fantasy XIV.
That's a lot.
All of which require different gear sets, and they are all at the minimum item level to get into the extremes and normal mode raids.
And
it really didn't take all that long to get to that item level. Now, obviously RNG can sometimes be fickle, but I feel like in Final Fantasy XIV, they design their systems in such a way that RNG doesn't get too annoying.
Raid fight progression.
Now, I mentioned this before, but learning fights in MMORPGs, at least for me, is one of the most enjoyable aspects of the games. I love...
That's something I'm really looking forward to whenever I do Pandemonium, the second, the other bosses, is I'm actually really excited to be able to play the content on like the hardest difficulty on release. So it's not like somebody can tell me like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that too. Like, you just have to learn it and know it yourself. I'm super fucking excited for that. It's going to be great on release. Well, yeah, like the ultimate, I'm probably not going to be able to do Dragon Song raid, Dragon Song, whatever the fuck it is. Probably won't be able to do that in time because I don't know when it comes out, but maybe. And yeah, no, whenever it comes out, like I'm going to pretty much, so like, I don't know, like I don't want to make a whole lot of plans for a mainstream or anything like that, but I'm just saying like, yeah, I do plan on making a lot of progress in MSQ quite quickly, because the truth is I want to play more Final Fantasy, but I feel like I can't because I have so many other things that I have to do first. You know what I mean? Like I can't make progress in the game because, or I can't do the Bajja thing or the Eureka thing or Heaven on High or like any of these other types of content in the game. I can't make my character better because I'm still in Heaven's Ward, right? Or I'm just starting Stormblood. So I do want to complete the MSQ so I can actually play the game, because I feel like I cannot play the game.
Progressing in mythic raid encounters for World of Warcraft, seeing the boss's HP slowly decreasing each pull, watching as the raid team got better and better at the mechanics, everyone moving in perfect harmony until it all comes together in that final blaze of glory and the boss goes down.
Whenever we killed Zurban,
it is a
that was really
great
cool
experience. It's fun. It releases that dopamine, and I wind up smiling from ear to ear. I think Final Fantasy XIV does this even better than World of Warcraft. We were doing the second extreme trial for Endwalker, so anyone who's done that knows exactly what I am talking about here. And the first phase was one of the best learning experiences I've ever had in raiding. It blew me away with just how much fun it is learning all those mechanics. And I mean that. All those mechanics. The first phase of this trial has about 10 mechanics you really have to get comfortable with in order to clear that phase. You will die. A lot. While trying to figure out what to do. Then you get into Phase 2, where the fight is almost completely unrecognizable from the normal mode, with many new mechanics added. And you also have to contend with every mechanic you were doing in Phase 1, so it becomes this insanely hectic phase. But, at the same time, as you learn it and become more acquainted with what's going on, the chaos of it starts to make sense.
Yeah.
And it feels really good when it all comes together.
Well, you guys don't understand how it works? Yeah, no, you're not talking about this, right? This is fucking obvious. You just have to stand there. If you get the blue one, you stand in the red one. It swaps every time it casts, and it does it 3 times with each of the cubes. Like, yeah, it's fucking obvious.
The chaos of it starts to make sense, and it feels really good when it all comes together.
Yeah.
So, there are 3 reasons I feel that progressing in Final Fantasy XIV feels so good. Number 1, food lasts through death. Yeah. So you don't feel like you are wasting a bunch of resources trying to beat these fights. Dying isn't nearly as much of a punishment. In World of Warcraft, when you die, your food effect goes with you, and it can become very annoying when you die a lot and have to keep eating that very expensive food.
True.
Number 2, infinite battle reses. You know, when I first heard of this, coming from World of Warcraft, I laughed at it. I thought that would make it way too easy. But here's the thing.
Yep.
I was an idiot. This makes progressing the fights so much less taxing and annoying. The first time we got to
I feel like I didn't realize how much I liked the infinite battle reses until I did Heroic Sylvanas. In Heroic Sylvanas, is it possible to have negative fun? Because if it is, I had that on Heroic Sylvanas. It was absolutely fucking garbage. I hated it so much. It was the least amount of enjoyable. It was the worst fight I've ever done. And it's because you'd have somebody die and you knew that you wouldn't meet the DPS check 5 minutes later, 2 minutes later, and you're just stuck there. It sucked, man.
In the Extreme Trial 2.
You're so biased? Well, wait, you think I'm biased? No way I'm not biased. Like, I've played WoW for 15 years. Yeah, like, you know, I'm not biased at all. Like, it just sucks. Yeah, that's all there is to it.
The boss was at like 35% HP. Just think about that.
Yeah.
We weren't even close to beating it. The infinite battle reses really help with making progression less annoying and more fun. You get to keep seeing more of the fight and its mechanics. If your group is dying all the time, you will not beat the Enrage. It's as simple as that. Battle resing gives you a minute of 25% less of your main stats, so your DPS is going to be severely dampened. So at the end of the day, your group still needs a solid performance to get the clear. Number 3.
That's that's what sucked about doing Alexander Savage. Is like, even if you, if you did one thing wrong, it was over. It was fucking over. It didn't matter like how many battle reses you have, because the screen goes black and you're done. Back to the start, bitch.
Do wipe, you start right back at the boss and can jump right back in. This helps so much. You don't have to run back. You don't have that downtime. You can just try again. You know, this is one of the reasons Super Meat Boy was such a fun platformer. Despite being brutally hard and unforgiving, when you died, you just spawned right away and could try again.
Yeah.
So, I am not going to lie, I had trepidation about using the Party Finder in Final Fantasy XIV. The Party Finder in World of Warcraft, well, it left me dead inside, and I was scared to even give it a shot in Final Fantasy XIV. Here's the thing. In World of Warcraft, my experience with the Party Finder was you would spend hours trying to get into a group for the content you wanted to do. A single wipe later, the group would fall apart, and you'd felt like you completely wasted your time and energy. The thing with World of Warcraft is, people tend to leave after a wipe or two. Many groups have the structural integrity of a house of cards. It doesn't take much to bring it down. I've seen so many groups fall apart.
Well, it's harder to find people, that's why. Is that in Final Fantasy, so there are many barriers to entry that Final Fantasy doesn't have that WoW does have. And the biggest one is the faction system. So you just multiply the amount of people, assuming it's 50-50, which we all know it's not, but let's assume it is. Assuming it's 50-50, you multiply the amount of people that you can invite by 2. You double the amount of people. And also, like, in Final Fantasy, you probably don't have to worry as much about people greeting. Like, obviously, I'm sure this happens at high levels. Yeah, sure. But it doesn't seem like there's as much of a parse culture in Final Fantasy as there is in WoW. Like, in WoW, there's a huge parse culture. Now, this could change. My perspective on this could change whenever I actually get to level 90 and I do endgame Savage. Sure. But from what I've seen so far, it's not as bad. It definitely exists, though. I'm sure it does.
And it doesn't take much. And in my own experiences, I've seen plenty of negative and downright mean comments when players messed up. So, in Final Fantasy XIV, I had this idea that you shouldn't be going into Party Finder unless you know the fights very well. I should have known the games would be different here. I mean, they are in so many other regards. But that lingering thought was still deeply embedded. So, I used Duty Finder to try to learn the fights to be ready for Party Finder.
And that's another thing with Final Fantasy is that in WoW, I think that it's like there's like 2 different cultural expectations. There's like the cultural expectation in WoW that you join a group and that group is supposed to teach you the fight. And in Final Fantasy, I feel like there's much more of an expectation that whenever you join a raid or you join a group for something that's like more challenging, like an extreme or a savage or something like that, that you already know what you're doing because you don't want to waste other people's time. And in my opinion, that's what I always think. If you go into something blind and everybody else isn't except you, and they don't know that, they're not okay with that, then you're in the wrong. It's called respect. Yeah, exactly. And the other way around, right, is that in World of Warcraft, like, not knowing something, people are like, oh, well, you don't pay my sub, etc. And there's never the expectation that you should know things ahead of time. It's not a cultural value that the community has. Or if it is, it's much more, it's toxically stated. You can lock Party Finder if you only want farmers for the extremes or raids. Yeah, I feel like it's the exact opposite. What I've always seen from Final Fantasy, and this is just my experience, and I haven't really played it a lot, but I've seen that there is much more of an expectation on players to come into fights that are challenging with prior knowledge. I think so. Like, there's much more of an expectation for it.
When I told my friend I was doing that, well, he laughed at me and told me to just use Party Finder. And thank God for that. So, I found a party in there relatively quickly for the extreme trial I wanted to do. It was advertised as practice.
And also another reason for this is because, correct me if I'm wrong, but can't you set in the party finder duty completed so you only invite people that have already completed it before? Yeah, that's good, because that way you never have a point where somebody could buy a carry, yeah, sure. But like allowing people to play with each other on the level that they want to play with each other at. Like if you want to do a farming group, you don't want to invite somebody that's never killed the boss before and wants to prog it. You just want to do a farming group. You want to just kill the boss over and over for the mount or something like that. And you don't want to deal with a whole lot of bullshit. And I think being honest about that and giving the people the ability to be honest about that is way better. Yeah, it's way, way, way fucking better. Because people can link fake achievements. They can have a high item level or something like that. There's like, in WoW, like linking fake achievements is super common. Like, people link me incompleted achievements, and they just hope that I won't notice that they were incomplete. But we can give people options? Yeah, you give people options. The same as, like, Final Fantasy has Master Loot. And it's not a problem.
And we wiped for about an hour straight on the first phase, and everyone was remaining positive the entire time. No one left group. I was in shock. And in all the groups I had joined, until I got my first kill, I had not once seen negativity, or people losing their tempers. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure players get agitated and lose their cool, and I'm sure if you tried to join a group that was farming an extreme trial with zero experience, they wouldn't be too pleased with you when you died over and over again. But, from my first 100%. Impressions using Party Finder, well, it was a very pleasant experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting raid gear in World of Warcraft is, well, it's like pulling teeth. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, and you feel like you are being jerked around a lot. That's by design. They want to keep you raiding and playing, and a way that they do that is by making gear take a while. This has not been the case in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, you get gear pretty quick.
I am specifically talking about extreme trials right now, but I'll talk a bit about the Pandemonium raids at the end. So, there are two extremes at the moment.
Got a lot of
Extreme 1 drops the right side gear, also known as rings, necklaces, etc. Okay. The fight drops 4 items, and you will also get a totem that you can exchange.
But no, y'all, some people in chat are right. Like, obviously, if you get banned if you're negative, that's a big fucking factor. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. Absolutely it is. The fact that people that are negative get fucking banned, then yeah, of course it reduces negativity. Absolutely. That's good, though. I don't know. It depends. I think calling people out for, like, making mistakes should be fair, and you should be able to tell people that they're doing things wrong without worrying about getting banned for it. But it's like whenever you start making really, really specific and overarching rules for social interactions, you do run into the problem of losing the nuance of why that interaction occurred or what the people are really saying. So it's mainly a case-by-case basis, I would say.
For gear, if your RNG is really bad. Extreme 2 drops your weapons, and it drops 1 role-specific weapon and 1 weapon coffer, which has a weapon for whatever role opens it. You also get a totem as well. If you are in a static, it will take at most 8 runs to get your weapon. If you are using the Party Finder and are really unlucky, it will take at most 10 runs, because that's how many totems it takes to trade for the weapon. Extreme trials can also be run as much as you want, so you can farm them until your heart's content.
I've seen people get the mount too on this already.
Now, the way raiding works, such as Pandemonium, is that all the raid encounters drop what the game calls relics, which have no role restriction on them, and you have to collect a specific amount of these relics in order to trade for the piece of gear that you want. The great thing about Final Fantasy XIV raids is that you only get locked out of loot from an encounter after you have already won a piece of loot.
Really?
So you can keep killing the boss over and over again
I didn't know that.
Until you get your desired relic.
Damn.
Then, you go to the Relic Exchange NPC, trade in the required amount of relics, and get...
See, if somebody said it takes too long to get kicked out, like, this is the way I deal with it, right? And this is the way I deal with things in WoW now. Like, if somebody is doing something wrong, I just kick them out. That's it. I don't talk to them. I don't negotiate with them. if you're not here to play the game the right way, you're kicked out. I'm not going to try to explain it to you. If this is a farm group, I'm not going to do any of this. Like, you're just wasting everybody's time. I'm not going to discuss this with you. You're out. Done, period, gone, finished, deleted, get somebody new. Toxic? See, I don't think that's toxic at all. Because everybody else, what's toxic is coming into the group and wasting 7 or 20 other people's time. 19, it's not toxic. Yeah, you're just out. Yeah, don't waste people's time. Depends on what the context of the raid is. Well, of course, everything always depends on context. You ban whatever you want. Square Enix does the same. What's the issue? Well, people just want to have, like, fair rules. You know, I think that's generally what it comes down to. It's not toxic to have expectations. Yeah, exactly. Do it in Final Fantasy, see what happens. I've kicked people out in Final Fantasy before. Yeah, it hasn't been a big deal. Like, it doesn't matter.
Your piece of gear. It can take a while, obviously, to fill out all of your gear, but you have complete control over what you get and when you get it, which is really nice. I dig player agency. That is so different from World of Warcraft, where after you kill a boss, the gear is locked out, regardless of if you got something, which increases the amount of time it takes to get gear, and also leads to frustration when something you want doesn't drop, after weeks of trying.
The thing is, somebody says I'm more tolerant in Final Fantasy. I definitely am. I am way more tolerant in Final Fantasy, and the reason that I'm more tolerant is it's very simple. It's because the fights that I'm doing require a lot of, like, if you compare, I think a really good a good comparison is how tolerant I am whenever I'm doing Herald of the Titans. Like, if you go back and you watch my videos for Herald of the Titans, I let people make way more mistakes on Herald of the Titans than I do in a current level raid. Because I know that the amount of time that it will take me to get a new person and then get that person up to speed faster is going to be longer than just expecting the current person to do their job right. It's kind of like I'm going to be more tolerant of a tank doing tanking badly in Scarlet Monastery than I am of a tank doing tanking badly in Stockades if I'm playing Alliance in Classic WoW. Because if you're doing it bad in Stormwind, I just kick you out and I get somebody else immediately and I replace you. Yeah, it's efficiency reasons. Yeah, it's purely efficiency.
Final Fantasy XIV gives you more agency and respects your time. You get to decide how you want to gear up your character, and that is something World of Warcraft has been lacking. Because of all of the RNG in World of Warcraft, it's hard to gear your character up the way that you want to. It feels really bad when the RNG weekly loot chest gives you stuff you don't need anymore.
I got a cloak in my my chest. A cloak. I already had a cloak.
Because you got it in the raid this week. Or worse yet, nothing of value. That is really the worst. I just wanted to say something here in closing. I don't think gear taking a long time to obtain is inherently a bad thing. The problem I have with it in World of Warcraft, and most modern MMOs, to be fair, is that gear is so replaceable that spending a bunch of time to get it, well, it seems utterly pointless and a complete waste of your time.
Yeah, it just gets replaced immediately.
You know that gear is replaced frequently, so spending a bunch of time to get it just feels
This fight takes a long time.
I remembered when I played Final Fantasy XI, gear in that game took a very long time to obtain. Sometimes you could go over a year without the piece of gear you want dropping.
That sucks.
The big difference was that Final Fantasy XI was far more horizontal with its gear progression, which basically meant that those pieces of gear were always relevant. You didn't feel like you wasted your time getting the gear because the game didn't replace it all the next raid. Anyways, that's how these two behemoth of games handle raid progression. I think it's pretty...
kind of like in Classic WoW. It's like once you get DFT, Drakefang Talisman, or once you get Neltharion's Tear, you're good, bro. Like, you're fucking good. Now, obviously, it's a little bit better if you get the Restrained Essence of Saffron. Yeah, it definitely is better. And, you know, like the other trinket from Dragonspine Trophy. Yeah, exactly. But gear is more horizontal in old WoW, and that's why it was more okay that things took a long time to farm. Because once you got it, you had it.
Obvious which one I prefer, but what are your thoughts? If you haven't raided in Final Fantasy XIV yet, does hearing this make you want to do so? And that's all I have for today. I hope you all have a very happy holiday. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. And until next time, well, take care.
It's a good video. He didn't talk about Savage loot rules at all. Locked out during no raid. Savage was different. You locked out after you clear regardless of a drop or not. Savage chests can only be used for a piece of gear corresponding to your class you're on at the moment. So you get a page that can be exchanged for loot. Oh, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, Savage. Yeah, I'm reading this. I think it makes sense that you're able to... You have more agency on what you do at lower difficulty levels. That's the same way it worked in ICC. Like, you could basically buy whichever parts of the tier set that you wanted early on. But if you wanted to get the higher levels to them, you had to get the special drops from the raid, for sure. Yeah, can you guys believe it has no dislikes? Oh my god.